Hi.
Hi. Hi.
I'm Gabriel D.Roberts. I'm the author of the book, Quest For Gnosis. Thanks. Thank you. This is my most recent book, and I've interviewed 20 of some of the best luminaries of our time on the subject of Gnosis. And if you're a little bit confused about what it means, well, that's what I'm here for, at least one of the reasons. What am I here for? What are any of us here for? I don't know. So we already did the celebration part. I was looking at my notes and I saw that it was very important that we make sure that we're celebrating. Because this is a celebration of life. This is a celebration of us working on trying to figure things out, solve some mysteries, some internal mysteries, some external mysteries. That's what we came here to do. We came here to be with like-minded people to get us charged up and inspired, help us figure out how to solve problems like how to stop the earth from being destroyed, minor issues like that. So a little introduction about myself. As I was saying, I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, and I grew up as an evangelical Christian, and I was very devout from childhood. As my family members could attest, I used to stand in front of the fireplace, and there was a televangelist. His name was Jimmy Swagger, and he got really sweaty and really, like, his voice shook a lot, Southern Baptist style, and he's like, you need, really, and it was funny because he always preached against things like lust and sleeping with prostitutes and embezzlement and things like that, and he did the famous I have sinned against you on Donahue or Oprah, I can't remember which one. But before that, before I knew biblical references, I would just sort of yell out, like, in the 5th chapter of 1984, it says that that sort of thing. And so I think that's where it all started to go wrong, as far as the vainglorious aspect of the lesser part of myself, I suppose. But I grew up into that, and I was very devout. I very much believed Christian doctrine. I believed that Jesus Christ was the only way. I believed that the world could only be saved through Him. I believed in the supernatural. I believed in demons. And I believed that Jesus could keep me safe from them. And so that sort of ideology followed me into adulthood. And I went on missionary trips. We went to Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah, and to Manti, Utah, to tell the Mormons that they weren't real Christians. I was handing out tracts to other children, and my brother was sitting on the prettiest of the Mormon girls, telling them about Jesus. He's a great minister that way. And we went through all of those things, and we were passionate. And we thought we had the truth. We had it on lockdown. And as time progressed, I had some second thoughts about it. And I went to theology school. I got my degree in theology from Seattle Bible College. It's a very small Pentecostal institution. And by the time I graduated, I came through a very significant crisis of faith. And I wrote about that in my book, which is called Born Again to Rebirth. And that storyline takes me through a lot of hard stuff. I don't know how many here have gone through a change from fundamentalism into a more broad-based paradigm, or if anyone has gone through any major paradigm shift, but it is terrifying. When you've built your entire cosmology, your entire sense of self upon an ideology, upon a concept, upon a thought, and then that thought is pulled out from underneath you. The Apostle Paul said, "It is not I that live, but Christ within me." And he also said, "I am a slave to Christ." Right? So yes, we are free. We had, theologically speaking, we are free and saved, but we're also slaves. But don't worry, we're not going to call you slaves. We call you friends, Jesus said. I do not call you slave, I call you friend. So these ideas were there, and when this ideology no longer worked, when it didn't make logical sense, it didn't make even sense with my heart as far as the way that I was looking at the rest of the world. I had an us versus them mentality. When those things began to crumble, I didn't have a point of reference. And I found myself very welcomed by the narcotic drug crowd of all groups. And man, it was like church, except you could have sex. You could do drugs, stay up all night. You could talk trash about people. But you had your little thing that I had in church. See, in church you have your group, you have your crew, you have your people, right? You have your methods. You have the things that you do. I bring my Bible with me. We pray together. We do all those things. Well, in drug circles, you have the same thing. You've got your little mirror. You've got your razor blade. You've got your Coke straw, right? You have things that you do. You listen to particular kinds of music. All of these things you follow through with. And so in many ways, it was exactly the same. And that really blew me away as well. And I talk about that period that I went through and that I gladly came out of in my book, Born Again to Rebirth. Why it's important that I discuss with you where I came from as far as my religious background is that we all have a certain ideology that we have carried. And even now, we're just prone to these sorts of things. We like comfort. We like the comfort of knowing certain things are secure. Nobody wants to sit down on a loose stool, right? Nobody wants to ride a bicycle when you know that the wheels aren't secured. Things like that. We like the sense of safety. We like to know that things are going to be okay. But something that I've learned is that nothing is standing still. Nothing is as concrete as we might like it to be. We want safety, but that's an illusion. And but our religions, especially fundamentalism in all of their forms, whether they be kind of that scientific fundamentalism we've been hearing about, to New Age culture, to any given religious system, we have this kind of fundamentalism, and it's a cultural device. And with each of them, there are devices that can be used for or against us, and people can be manipulated. And all of this comes from this idea of taking someone else's word for it, right? Pastor stands up, they say, "This is what this verse means." And people nod their heads. They go, "Oh yeah, that's what that verse means." And then another pastor in another church says with the same verse, "This is what this verse means," right? And so on and so forth. There is a problem there because we're taking someone else's word for it. And what gnosis is, as the Greeks would say, an intrinsic experiential knowledge. It means that we know things for ourselves. We don't take someone else's word for it. As we know, when we listen to other people, we may find people that really inspire us, we like what they say, and then they say something and you're like, whoa, no, that can't possibly be right. It's something that doesn't jive with you, right? There's something not quite there, but you're like, but all their other stuff's really great. So what do? Well, that's what we ought to be doing, right? We're supposed to be filtering these things. And gnosis is when we take it upon ourselves to be responsible for ourselves in that regard. And at the core of the best of every spiritual discipline is a return to that personal responsibility. We talk a lot about shamanism, for instance, and there is a tendency for a veneration and even a fetishization of these cultures because in many ways they've been kept pure and secure from our Western ways. But even in that sense, we also have to remember that we're responsible for where we are, for our culture, for what our responsibilities are here, and how we carry ourselves. So that gnosis, that direct understanding and knowledge, also has an implication in modern magic. And what do I mean by modern magic? I essentially mean the Western strain that way back when came through shamanism and went through all of the different veins. And because of the nature of Western society and the domination of fundamentalism, a lot of that stuff had to be subverted. And this is kind of what caused a lot of things to come about with secret societies. A very outspoken monk named Giordano Bruno thought that it would be okay to bring back the Hermetic Society, to bring back a lot of the things that Graham Hancock was talking about, this beautiful religious tradition that came from Egypt that venerated the gods. And Giordano Bruno kind of was one of those people who really catalyzed the subversion of Western shamanism, or what we would now consider magic or witchcraft, things like that. And now we have the stigma of that word, witchcraft. We have the stigma, we imagine Gothic people walking around, with all dark makeup and so on and so forth. But that's not the reality. When we get down to the core of it, Western magic will tell you just as easily that the greatest work of magic that one can do is to transform themselves. And isn't that the core of what we're supposed to be doing anyway? So this is why Gnosis is so important, because it has multiple meanings in present times. We have this absolute need for taking personal responsibility, for taking the experience for ourselves. I would not trust a virgin to give me sex advice. I would not trust a person to tell me what pizza is if they've never eaten pizza in their entire life. Because you can read a book about pizza, right? You can watch a film about pizza, you can see Anthony Bourdain. Lots of things can happen. You can even have separate ingredients. But unless you've tasted pizza, you really shouldn't be speaking as an authority on the subject, or you don't have a point of reference. And so, this is why it's important. Now, a lot of people see our traditions, our religious traditions, as dividing lines, right? We see the Christian tradition as divided from Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism and Gnostic Christianity and so on and so forth. But there's an ongoing theme. What occurs is that each party, especially the fundamentalist sects, will say, oh, well, when we do this thing where we get all razzed up and raptured and we're feeling the touch from the divine, when we do it, that's God. But when everybody else does it, that's evil, right?
Yeah.
And it's so common. And then someone says, oh, well, this isn't the way to do it. Imagine, perhaps in another way, all of these belief systems and the gnosis that runs through them being like ice cream. Not everybody likes pecan ice cream. Not everybody likes salted caramel. I know I do. But you know what I'm saying? So we have these, and everyone's trying to appropriate these things and say, no, this is our God experience. This is our experience with the divine. It's only ours. The reality is, just as Graham was saying previously, it's a human experience. We are experiencing the divine through a myriad of ways. And one of the key ways is through the magical Gnostic state, which is the way the shaman communicates with the other side. It's when we get into a state of deep meditation. It's when we are eating 5 dry grams of psilocybin mushrooms, as Terence McKenna talked about. It's in our DMT trips. It's in all of these things. It's in those dances that we do. And all of them are variations, and whichever one we experience, of course, we think is the best. But the only way to know is to try, right? And so, if we can look from that perspective, then we have this sense of radical openness. And we don't see all of these different sects and groups and religions as separate things, but we actually see that there's a common thread there. We can see the humanity of it. We can see the beauty of it. And that's a big challenge, especially when I look back upon my Christian traditions. There's a part of me that sees it as vitriolic. It sees it as a device that the powers that be uses to dominate and continue and perpetuate the male dominator society paradigm. I see a lot of that, but at the same time, I've met some really beautiful, wonderful people, and I can't speak to where they are and what they're doing. That's not my thing, which also leads to, what am I doing with myself? We're spending all of our time worrying about who's going to save us, who's going to come get us. Will it be aliens? Will there be a great revelation? Will there be something? And yet, maybe it's as simple as taking responsibility for the things that we've been going through. You know, I've been writing and presenting through Reality Sandwich and disinfo.com, Vice, and writing books. And for much of that time, I was drinking every night. Every night. And I didn't hurt anybody. You know, I may have made an ass of myself from time to time, but in general, I was a pleasant, happy guy. But every single day, I drank a little too much. And when I'd go on my psychedelic trips, I would never tell anybody. The voice on the other side would be like, stop, stop, stop. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just overthinking this. The reality was that I had to take responsibility for the fact that I was abusing alcohol. And actually, 60 days ago, I quit drinking.
Yeah.
And it's embarrassing to say that. It's embarrassing to say that I had a fault that I wasn't really hiding, I just wasn't talking about. And it's one of many faults that I have. But I had to address it. Because I can't be telling people about this great thing called gnosis, about intrinsic knowledge, and about personal growth if I'm hitting the bottle too much, right? That's hypocrisy. I'm a hypocrite. And I think that if we look, we all know that there's things that we have in our own life that we need to deal with in that same sense. Conversely, there's the ecstatic state, which is something that we achieve and we can achieve through entheogens, through various substances. And there is a distinction between use and abuse. I've heard a lot of people give really good delineations between what that is. You know, if, for instance, Terence McKenna once talked about, he was a very frequent marijuana user. He said, I wish that I didn't smoke weed all day, every day, because when I don't, and I have a long time that I don't, and I use it during a sacred time, it's just as powerful as many of these other substances that we hold dear. But he couldn't, right? And even Graham was talking about his issue with that sort of thing. It had gotten in the way because it was being, in its own way, misused. And that's for us to work personally. It's not for other people to judge. That personal responsibility is the crux of it. We're personally responsible. It's not big pharma. It's not big corporations. It's us buying the clothes in China. It's us buying the food that's at the grocery store that isn't organic or whatever it is because it's cheaper. We make there's no way that we can avoid this in the first world, not participating in the hypocrisy, right? But what we can do is take these things apart line by line. And as we do it, and as we feel better, and as we show it, people see the example. If we want to see the revolution, it starts right here. And of course, I'm sure we've heard this before, but have we really taken it to heart? You know, our practices that we know are good for us, right? The ones that we can stick with, those are the things we should be focusing on and building more with. And less of the fear-mongering. Regardless of what happens, at least I personally feel it's going to be okay, right? We don't have to live our entire life under the umbrella of fear and domination. Because, let's say for the sake of argument, we'll take this fear and domination idea. We'll talk just for a second about what the Christian Gnostics said. And they believed that this Jehovah character was this archonic, essentially a spiritual vampire, who either would feed off of your fear or off of your worship. Either way, that dude wins, right? And so if we think about this fear-based society, what are we feeding, right? This isn't to say that we don't face the darkness. As from Gary's presentation, we know that we really have to focus on the fact that we have a shadow, that shadow needs work, that we need to not ignore the stuff that needs work. This is where we are. It's the hard work. It's not always sunshine and rainbows. In fact, I would say that the most powerful things that we can possibly do in our lives are the hardest things. I've spent the better part of the last year on the road going through some very significant changes. I've had to be subjected to the embarrassment of being broke, not having money, not having food, needing help. But I've also experienced more miracles in the last year than I've experienced ever before. Those synchronicities happen when we kind of obey what would traditionally be the Logos, the Holy Spirit, the Holy Guardian Angel, as magicians would say. There is a part of us that knows, but it's scary for us. We do live in the first world, and first world consequences love to come down on people who are trying to do things in a different way. In the archaic sense, we can look to tribal cultures and lament that we aren't there, that we aren't doing that. But we also have to remember that hopefully we think we're here for a purpose. And if that's the case, then our purpose is here. We're here for a reason. The bad stuff that we're seeing, the bad stuff that we have to be a part of and be surrounded by is it's pervasive. I spoke with Daniele Bolelli in my book, Quest For Gnosis, and he is an inspiring writer. He wrote a book called Build Your Own Religion. And he's a teacher, I believe, down at Santa Clara. And he was talking to me we were talking about enlightenment and achieving this great mystical knowledge and so on to save the world. And he said, what kind of enlightenment is it that we would have if we went onto the high mountain and we achieved this great understanding and we were cloistered away, we didn't have to hear the road noise as we were meditating, we didn't have to be around people who were frustrating us, we didn't have to think about our bills. What kind of enlightenment would it be if it only worked there? Wouldn't it be better to achieve the kind of enlightenment we're looking for right here in the thick of it? And this is why in my book in the introduction I say that we're the shamans of the wasteland. We're the shamans for here and now. And that's not to take away from the magic that they're doing in the Amazon and abroad. But it is to say that if we think that those people are valuable, we also have to remember that we're valuable. That we have a commission of our own, in that sense, to be responsible, to use logic and balance it with our own mystic ideas and concepts, and understanding that they're our own. In the Quest For Gnosis, I also discuss Robert Anton Wilson's concept of reality tunnels. Basically, reality tunnels are, right now is a great example. I can look out upon the audience and see all of you, but each of you is sitting in a different seat. And each of you notices different things about the room, what she's wearing and what he's doing, all these things. And we're all looking from a different bevel, from a different facet. And this reality tunnel that we have, we've built based upon everything that we've experienced in our whole life. In fact, our realities are all a little bit different. There seems to be a consensus playing field, but I'm sure we've all experienced where we're talking to someone and we just don't see eye to eye. Even though we may be agreeable on many points. Well, it's because our tunnels are built differently, and we actually have blinders to these sorts of things. So, the more we remain open to these new concepts and just take it a little more easy and say, oh, man, I don't know everything, and things aren't going to be stable ever. The more that we can accept that, the more we can learn to ride life like a wave, rather than drown in the flood of information and all of this stuff. We can become those people who navigate the space. I'm sure, just like the shamans in the jungle, life isn't easy. But they found a way to do it with grace. And we need to do that here. And we need to do that by example. These magical states are a birthright, again, as Graham would claim. They don't have to be entheogenic, but I feel perfectly all right with that. I can say with absolute clarity that the other night, while I was out here, after we had it, I had my own psilocybin experience, and it was majestic. It was absolutely the most glorious thing. The moon shone down, and the stars were like diamonds, and the presence of God was there. I felt absolutely at peace, absolutely one with everything. I don't think there's a smidgen, not even a moment or an iota of sin or evil in that moment. That is a birthright that I have, and it's a birthright that I claimed for that time and place. And so, when we think about the psychedelic experience, that puts us in a Gnostic state. But it doesn't replace the everyday hard work, the meditation, the being mindful of how we speak to others, personal improvement. It's a fucking drag. It's hard to be constantly analyzing ourselves, like, what am I doing? Am I peacefully abiding today? Did I get it all right today? It's hard to constantly be analyzing, and we have to give ourselves a break and be like, oh, that's right, I'm human, I'm here to learn. I'm here to make mistakes and learn from the mistakes and go through all of that. But the psychedelic experience, when you have it, it's not the only thing that goes on, right? I heard a great example for the psychedelic experience versus everyday meditation, our own personal practices, however we feel best with that, is that psychedelics are like taking a helicopter to the top of the mountain. You see the majesty of the top of the mountain, and you hang out there, and then the helicopter takes you back down, and you're back at the bottom of the mountain. On the other hand, climbing up the mountain keeps you there, gives you the consistency, that peace, that sense of strength that comes with discipline. So there's no quick fix for it. So the question is, how do we spread Gnosis? One, obviously, by example, by following through where our heart's leading us to go, by using logic and reason, balancing out our mystic tendencies. Science is our friend. We can use the scientific method to have a lot of new, beautiful experiences. Nature itself is fabulous and beautiful. Another way that we can spread Gnosis, I think, is something that's been touched on. For instance, Rupert Sheldrake, who is also in the Quest for Gnosis, has this theory of morphic fields. And if these are correct, he talks about experiments in which laboratory rats will be taught a particular habit in New York, and then laboratory rats in London will know these habits already. They'll very quickly learn them much faster than the initial ones. There seems to be some sort of catalyzing change that occurs when a new epoch happens in the lives of these laboratory rats. And we find, there's an excellent book by Jean Gebser called The Ever-Present Origin, and the primary thrust of his work is to say that there are major epochs in human history, in what we would call like the evolution of consciousness, in which particular people, because of their new levels of perception, it had that sort of catalyzing effect that spread like wildfire. Leonardo da Vinci was the first to make three-dimensional drawings that were to scale. Nobody had done it before, but all of a sudden, all over the world, we were getting three-dimensional drawings to scale. Something had happened. And in Gebser's book, The Ever-Present Origin, he shows this time and time again throughout history, throughout recorded human history, through our art, through our writing, through all of these things, that there are changes. And what I believe this is, what this means to us, is that we think if we just work on our own stuff and we don't constantly put out all the information, constantly, like, everybody has the friend on the internet who posts like 10 things per day, and you're like, oh man, I wish it was only one a day. That sort of thing, right? If some of that effort and energy was put towards our own personal work, it is possible, I believe, if Gebser's correct, that when we come to our new stages of growth, when we come to our new stages of understanding through the hard work that comes through just the everyday drudgeries of being open to learning, we could possibly make that breakthrough that catalyzes change for everybody else. And I think that this is something that hasn't been emphasized enough, that we are very powerful in this concern. And I think that the reason why the term gnosis should be considered is that, one, it's an ancient word. It's something that's been around for a long time, and it's something that was important to Plato and Aristotle. It was important to people back in the day, and it's just as important now. I think we need it more than ever to have a recognition that all of us here have all of the power that we need, and we need to walk with equal parts humility and power, and know that we can go through this life and live fearlessly, and be okay with being embarrassed, be okay with being broke sometimes, be okay with all of the confusion that other people have when they're like, I don't understand what this guy's doing, I don't know what this lady's thinking. Just roll with it, keep going, stay humble, stay ready to learn. And that's why it's called the Quest for Gnosis. If we were going to show up here perfect, we wouldn't have much of a story. Nobody wants to see a movie where the guy wakes up in the morning, he's super happy, everything he wants happens first thing in the morning, and continues to happen, and everything is amazing until the very end of the movie where he dies in his sleep with a smile on his face. I don't know if that movie's been made, but I don't think anyone would watch it or read it. That's not the story. So, why is the Quest for Gnosis important? Because it's our quest. It's your quest. And that's what I got for you. You guys have any questions? I'm more than happy to answer them. I'm also here. I have my books here. I'm more than happy to sign them, talk with you. Question?
I just wanted you to finish your roomie, then you got burned at the stake.
Yes, right? Yeah, Giordano Bruno he thought it would be a good idea to kind of reintroduce this idea, that the Gnostic idea, or at least the precursor to it, or a continuation of it. And he was tortured in the Vatican catacombs for 8 years, and then he was burnt at the stake. You can actually find that story in Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval's book, The Master Game. It's an excellent read. Any other questions?
Wasn't that the same Bruno in Cosmos?
Yeah.
Yes, it was, absolutely.
Well, I just wondered if you have any thoughts, or if anybody has any thoughts about who might be, in recent times, change maker, like Leonardo. Who's going to come down in history as pivotal, or whatever? I said I think Graham Hancock and Rupert Sheldrake are those people.
Right. Well, I think that's a big question. I think that regardless of whether we believe everything they're doing or not, we have people in recent past like Carl Sagan who have re-energized a love for science. And of course there's the balance with the spirituality versus science and things like that. I see you shaking your head. But what I'm saying is that we have to maybe that time is over. I don't know, maybe those people are the unsung heroes. Isn't it better if we're all doing it? Isn't it, right? I think it's better if we start to stop hero worship and fetishization of a particular style of person or one person. We're here to be the net, you know what I mean? We're here to be an unstoppable force that's built up of this multicolored rainbow vision of fantasticness, that what we represent here and so many others who aren't present. Yes, sir?
Do you still consider yourself something of a Christian?
I think I stay away from any one particular denomination. I suppose if I were to put myself into any sort of category, it would be closest to theosophical ideal. In Theosophy, that was started by Helena Blavatsky, their ideal was to integrate our newest advances and understanding in science with the best of age-old wisdom, and to have a balance and have a mixture of those things. It's not a mix and match, it's a hybridization. It's just like when Bruce Lee took all of the Kung Fu forms, right? There are all these different ones where this move was inefficient, so Bruce Lee changed it to this move, and he created Jeet Kune Do. He created a hybrid that nobody could beat. And this is the kind of thing that we're looking to do, is make a hybridization So I think my best explanation, of course, this is a great plug for my book, Born Again to Rebirth, would be that I offer up some solutions there and my perspective on that there. Anyone else?
How do you get more money for your books if you buy them here, or on your website, or through Amazon, or what's the best way to get money in your pocket?
I would say that buying my book here would be great because I can talk to you, you can sign the book, and you can banter that way. I like that. That's why I brought them here. Yes, sir.
Yes, we have this power within ourselves, and yet there seems to be this human tendency towards hierarchy or seeking leaders. And in that sense, so it put teachers in that category too. Speak to that.
We're taught to obey authority, and in some senses there should be obviously a respect for our elders and so on and so forth. But we're seeing this diffusion. The top-down authority is not a very good model much anymore. And this is what's difficult because let's just say, put it this way, the baddies know how to do this really well, right? The baddies know that we love a hero, that we love that knight in shining armor that's going to come fix things. And so it's a challenge for us in the anti-propaganda campaign, I suppose, to find a way in which we can use the tools of the enemy without losing our soul in the process. And that's pretty difficult.
What do you feel about the path moving forward, whether, I guess individually, whether it be better to work with the old paradigm, say institutions such as higher education, to get a PhD in whatever, and do non-traditional work versus, trying to blaze a trail where we're doing something that we feel called to do? Do you think that getting that outer legitimacy in the mainstream is I guess, what's needed moving forward, or do you think there's a call to do the other way?
I think that's an individual choice because I know, for instance, that, I'm pursuing a master's degree and onto a doctorate. I'm doing that because I wanted to ever since I was a kid. And there are benefits of having the degree. But I also have a friend who's an executive at SpaceX, and he doesn't have a high school diploma.
I work at Broadcom, and I moved from IT to healing, and I want to, the part of me wants to blaze a trail, and another part of me feels like it's safer to stay with, I guess, the legitimacy of having that was letting out my name.
Right.
And it opens up more doors, I feel.
Well,
having doctors or
I think you should do what you love and be prepared to starve for it for a really long time and not get any recognition. And then it'll be awesome. And you'll be really happy. Anyone else?
I would like to.
Yes?
I keep finding that the shift in paradigm is occurring, slowly, too slowly sometimes. But from the materialistic idea that here we are, these individual beings, to recognizing that each of us is a unique expression of God energy, that each of us is the second coming. But then we've got clouds in our sky that say, oh no, you can't do that. And so I find that those clouds in our sky also become our greatest, where we build our strength, but it's also our greatest weakness. And my research over the last 25 years has been about personal transformation and how to find those patterns that set us up for not getting what we say we want. So I look at it, if we're not getting what we say we want, it's because we've got some unloving beliefs coming true that set up our uniqueness. And so within that uniqueness, we can appreciate our uniqueness, but then we also have a pathway to find those belief structures that say things like, I'm nothing to them. I don't have anybody in my life who's responsible. And that can come from triggers. These are coming from past life, generational, cultural inheritance things. But to be able to, if somebody wants to push their transformation on these, one of the best things I find is if you're not getting what you want, you go into the feeling of not getting what you want, whether it's pounding pillows or journaling like crazy or something like that. So you feel the emotion of not getting what you want because it's the stuck emotion that's holding in place the unloving belief. When you can melt it off and your subconscious release what that belief is, like, I can't depend upon a man, and then choose to shift it because you realize that's been guiding your sense of how life is, all your life. When you change it, that becomes a transformation that allows you to actually act much more what you can.
That's good. I like the analogy that I've used, a variation of it. We are God playing hide and seek with itself, right? Like maybe that's it. I mean, if you were omnipotent, omnipresent, omni-everything, you might get a little bored. What would you do? I'd break myself up into quadrillions of pieces and play hide and seek with myself. It sounds like a fun time. But experiencing all things, imagine the compassion. How could God have absolute, ultimate compassion for us? Well, if God was us and had to know what it's like to be dumped, what it's like to be murdered, all the bad stuff along with the good, I think that would be kind of the way to go about learning that. Any other questions? Yes?
I wanted to first of all thank you for your work and the ability to allow us to take on our own quest. But I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot, if I may. Who was your favorite of all these that you interviewed? What was your favorite, perhaps part of the book, or if I could isolate you to one part of it?
I was really inspired, actually, with my conversation with Dr. Lou Graham. And his story, I talked with him. When you interview so many people, you have difficulty in getting everybody to do the same format, right? Somebody is on Skype, somebody's on the phone, somebody's through email conversations. Even some I did through instant messenger on Facebook. But I talked to Dr. Lou Graham, and he has, I believe he has a double doctorate. And he knows traditional Gnosticism back and forth. He's been featured as Writer of the Month on GrahamHancock.com. He's a great friend and confidant of Graham Hancock's as well. But his story was so mind-blowing and tremendous. He was talking about his own near-death experience. And he was saying that he was insulted even by the idea of the word near-death experience. He's like, I did die. And I did go through this. And the story that he tells was so phenomenal. And I was sitting there on the phone. It was better than any movie. I was just on the edge of my seat like, well, what happened next? What happened next? And he's like, oh, I saw my dead brother. And, he's like sick in bed. And he has, I believe he has Lou Gehrig's disease. And he went through an episode in which he died. And when he came back, you're not supposed to come back unless you're treated within a certain very short time frame. And he was well beyond that time frame. And he died and came back, and his story was phenomenal. I don't want to give too much away because, well, one, it's very detailed, so I couldn't possibly replicate it here with the amount of time. But Dr. Lou Graham's stuff was really great. I thought that a lot of people gave an excellent take. This was the beauty of having so many different interviews on the same subject, is you get these little pieces that are so gorgeous. And in that's why the Quest For Gnosis is great, because it tells the story from so many different ways. If something one person says doesn't resonate with you, you can be sure that the next one's going to be like, oh, I've never thought that before. We'll take one more and then we'll do books or whatever.
So I call myself a Gnostic, but if you say that to people, maybe they're agnostic, they're agnostic. So lately I've just been saying, well, my religion is God is too big to fit inside any religion. So what do you think about labels and using?
That's a hard thing. The ancient Gnostic tradition is very similar in a lot of its theological trappings to like Hinduism. And there are a lot of ideas like reincarnation, stuff like that there is an unknowable, absolutely unseen God that's far too big. It's like what Judas said to Jesus in the book of Judas, when he was saying in front of the disciples, you represent the one who is unseen, who is far beyond this demiurge sort of God. Labels are kind of funny. I mean, this is language. We have a limited language, and we find ourselves stumbling over ourselves, and those words have power, and they do cause little boxes to happen. And And really, as many people would say, one of the key elements of modern magic is language. Grimoire just means grammar. It's just a fancy word of saying grammar. And our words have power. So I guess the best thing that you could do is work on your vocabulary as far as that's concerned, and really get down to the nitty-gritty of what you stand for in the most concise and powerful way. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.